Well, Jack, I asked you a question about Macon, and I'm
Right.
going to ask you the same question about Mercer University. I mean, you've been affiliated with this institution for
Yeah.
decade upon decade,
Yeah.
and it's changed.
It
And I
has
wonder if you
changed.
just reflect a little bit on how it's changed.
Well, there are good things and there are bad things. You don't mean just the law school.
No, I
Because
mean
we've
the
talked, the university.
University, more broadly speaking.
Yeah. Good things and bad things. I mean, the campus is certainly much, much better than it's been at any time during the time we were here. It's much more attractive. There are more services available for students. It's, use a word that I use for Macon, it's more vibrant. It's also more interesting. Laney and I occasionally walk over there with the dog, and yeah, it's a good place to walk around. So in those ways, in the physical plant ways, and in the sports as well, it is all so much better, so much better. That I especially enjoy the basketball, not just the recent stuff, but we've been going to basketball games for a long time, and that's such a gift to have that available to us when we're here. There are other parts of what it means to be a university, though, that I'm not sure about. Tom Glennon is a dear friend and taught there for 45, 50 years. He's going through a very hard time right now. He's in his 70s and will be retiring before too long. Because there was a culture at the university, especially in the undergraduate school, when he got there, that was important and interesting to him. It was a dynamic group of scholars, not so much in their publications. In fact, one of them once criticized the other for what he called a wanton act of scholarship. But they were alive, and they brought their students into it as well. And they were characters, they were interesting characters, and they exchanged things, and they talked about things. And this was across all of the departments. And they did battle with the central administration over and over again. And it was a very interesting school. I thought that had the potential of being quite special, small liberal arts school. Something that the South doesn't have much of. There's Sewanee University of the South, Davidson, and hard to find others that are the equivalent of all those small liberal arts schools that are so academically wonderful in New England. I thought this school had potential of doing that. But I think Tom's problem is that almost all those people are gone, and what has taken their place is not much to his liking. It's not that the people aren't good, they're fine, but each department is divided up, everybody goes their own way, there's not that much of a faculty community there that he sees. They don't do battle with the central administration. It's different. It's a very different place. It's larger, it's more bureaucratic, it's more of an institution, less of a community.
Is this more of a function of just growth? than anything else?
Growth is a large part of it, but it's also decisions about how things are to be evaluated. And you fall in line with various economic models and with economic thinking and alike. And so I don't think growth has to do that.
Mhm.
I don't want to blame anyone in particular. There are a lot of reasons for that happening. So I guess I would join Tom. I knew some of those people that he's talking about fairly well. And I guess I would join Tom in being concerned.
Mhm.
He's also concerned about the pressure to admit students because the school has grown and you got to the point where they can't say no because they need the money. Tom's not a Baptist. Tom was a Catholic, and but someone who had left the Catholic Church and then later returned to it, but losing its Baptist identity. For many people that doesn't seem like a loss, but at one point there was something called a Mercerian Baptist, which was also known as First Amendment Baptists. The Baptists are the reason why historically we protect speech and religious rights. That was unique to Mercer. Mercer was the sort of the home of that Baptist thinking, and that identity is rapidly disappearing. So I don't know. It's becoming too much like every other school. It's like cars. Cars used to be interesting. Now they all look alike.
Well, let me ask you about one last institution that you've been affiliated with, as have I, and that's the Vine Ingle Little League here in Macon, now in its 60th year.
Yes.
And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what that affiliation has
Happiest days of my life.
Tell me what.
The days coaching at Vine Ingle and being associated with Vine Ingle. And it's amazing to me. I'm only here back in Macon for 3 months out of the year. And when Lainey and I are walking around downtown, it seems like every third person I bump into is someone that has some connection with Vine Ingle. And they always say the same thing: happiest days of my life. It is baseball. It is that you're working with your sons and daughters and in a close and interesting way, and it is the competitiveness of it, but it's more than that. It's just a culture there that is so good and becomes so important.
What is it about the culture that makes it different?
I don't know what it is now, but we rarely had problems with parents that others suffer through. Because in part, Mr. Jones, who, in the field is named after, he would catch the kids when they're very young, T-ball, and deal with the parents immediately. I think he's the one that established that culture. And no one wanted to confront George, and certainly not the parents. Didn't mean you weren't competitive and cared about the outcome and all of that stuff. You did. But there was a good way of doing that and bad ways of doing it, and he knew the difference and taught it and insisted upon it in the coaches. Now, there was one coach that had, when I was coaching, and he coached for 2 out of the 3 years that I was, the initial times that I was coaching, he had a very difficult time because he, big, strong, muscular guy, had a hard time controlling his temper, would lose it. As you know, there were young kids, including Brian Adams, who were the umpires. My son later on, one of the umpires. And
both of my sons.
Yep, and first job for most of them. And I did the umpires for a while, as you did the umpires for a while, and that was rewarding. But he would lose it, and he would just get down on his knees and plead with the umpire and beat the dirt and everything else, and you'd hear him screaming over there when there was a call, and on. And they had to deal with him. I mean, the board had to deal with him, but I thought they dealt with him well. And I remember this so vividly. Here's this powerful man, intimidating, and he calls me at home after one of these games, and he said, "I don't know why, but I just had to call you." It was one of the games he had had an outburst in, and I want you to know that I came home and I read the Bible, and I want to call you to apologize and to tell you that I have asked to be forgiven. And it was so touching. And so, I mean, it just went to the very heart of who he was. And he was pretty much true to that afterwards. I've seen him a few times, mostly would be eating at the same place and the like. And we're still acquaintances. And
Well, I'm still on the board out there, and you'll be happy to know that it's a frequent topic of conversation to say, well, what would Mr. Jones do?
Yep. Mr. Jones was the soul of that place, that's for sure. I guess they knew how to be competitive without the competition taking over. When Tom Joyce was our coach, for that 1 year, the families around that team came so close to each other, and it was so important to us. Not the winning, we won, but it wasn't the winning. It was just what the team was doing, how players were responding, how was so and so, and what happened in that game. All the interesting things we had. Among us, one of the city editor from the Macon paper, who after each game would write up a newspaper that described the game, and he'd make sure to mention players, that everybody got mentioned in some fashion. He kept all the stats and everything else. And the parents would tumbled over each other to get copies of our newspaper. And he did it so well. He took it very seriously and did it so well. And at the going away party, I wrote up this little thing, and we did a plaque, and it was called, rather than the Pulitzer Award, it was called the Pull Hitter Award. And then as a group, we went together and bought Tom that famous picture of Ted Williams called The Kid. Mm-hmm. I think it was his first year, and it's signed by Ted Williams and framed.
Isn't that nice?
Wasn't cheap.
Yeah, well, those are great years, and great memories.
Yeah, and I have to say, this is awful of me, but Lanier and I won 3 years in a row at different levels on the way up. And I had, the old guard very, very puzzled about who's this new kid who won 3 years. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know baseball nearly as well as they did, and I didn't manage nearly as well as they did. But I think I knew how to pick players and motivate them. We had this one kid come up to me, he was my shortstop, he was a bit of a star. Actually, I think it was his mother that came up to me at the end of the season, or maybe it was the next season when I wasn't coaching him. She said, we still have the shrine in our in his room, but he set up a little shrine. Mm-hmm. So it had the picture of the team, and it had the ball, and it had stories of different games and everything else. He had a special little place, and that's just so wonderful.
Of course, it also says something about Vine Engle that you were the new kid, and you'd probably been in Macon about 15, 20 years at that point.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I just love that place. Yeah. Drive by sometime, even when there's not a game, just to be reminded. And I know there's temptations to move, and it's not the safest neighborhood, and so forth and so on, but I really hope they don't.
They'll be out there tomorrow. Come by.
Okay. Yeah. Good. Well, I'm going to be, unfortunately, on the road.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we're really here at the end,
okay.
And first I want to say thank you again. We've been very generous with your time and your memories.
Well, thank you for doing it, Pat. I really appreciate, not just appreciate you doing this for me, but you've done this with so many others, and it's just such a gift.
Well, I thank you, and I hope to do a lot more of them, because I learn a lot, and they're fun to do. I'm going to ask you what I think may be the hardest question that I've asked you in 2 days of doing this. And I want to ask it in a very particular way of you.
Yeah.
First, by asking you to define something for us.
Oh.
Okay?
Okay.
And that's the concept of eudaimonia.
Yeah. Well, it's flourishing. It's really Greek for happiness, but it was a particular kind of happiness, and it was an Aristotelian concept that a way of making sense out of our lives, that our lives had there was a functional way, I've used that word many times, there was a functional way of understanding our lives. And so, like a tree, when a tree lives a good life, the tree flourishes. When the conditions are well, it flourishes. But also, there are trees that when the conditions aren't well, and they won't be, trees that live long periods of time, there'll be dry years, there'll be storms that rip off limbs and so forth and so on, that they're trees that can weather those storms and weather the droughts and everything else, and through it all continue to flourish. So it's that idea for human beings, that not so much whether you are happy or not, that's contingent. Too many things can determine that for you. It's not up to you, not within your control. But that you can nevertheless flourish through those. It was that idea, and it was the way in which he made sense out of Lot, made sense out of what the good is in human conduct, made sense out of ethics in our relationships with others, and the importance of friendship, which was crucial to him, that those were ways of flourishing. Mm-hmm. So he used the word eudaimonia, and said, and I hate to say it this way because you're going to ask me the question, he said you can't know flourishing until you look back over a life and determine that it was well lived.
Right. And that was, of course, what I wanted to make sure I understood, and that I learned this from you, that it is in the looking back that you determine, right? This is not a moment-to-moment thing. This is a looking back. I hesitate to ask this question this particular way because it makes it sound like you're at the end of your life, and you're not. Right? We know there's lots more to come, and you've talked about your plans and so on.
All right, I got to get through the fantasy baseball season at least. I'm doing okay and improving each day. So.
All right, so let me ask it this way, with a so far.
Okay.
Okay. So far, looking back. Over your life, how would you answer the question? Have you achieved this thing, this eudaimonia, this flourishing that you've talked about?
Achieved.
Achieved, maybe the wrong word.
Yeah, I don't know. Achieved is the right word because it sounds like, well, I got there and it's done.
Right. No, and you're right. I didn't mean to use that verb, but do you sense it, I guess? Sometimes.
Yeah. I thought about this because I figured you were going to ask me that. And I may have mentioned this before, but I asked my uncle sort of a similar question. He was an extraordinarily successful lawyer by all measures, including the deep appreciation of his clients, admiration of judges, and admiration of his partners in the law firm, and everything else. And I asked him about that. How did that happen? And he said, luck. And at the time I thought, well, he's just being humble. But I'd have to say that I feel that I've been extraordinarily lucky in almost everything. And that feeling of being so lucky in so many things, in a sense, gets in the way of my thinking about flourishing. Because it doesn't seem to be my doing. I don't feel as if it was so much my accomplishment. Goodness knows, people have been so kind, so generous to me, including this. And I just bumped into a student in the hall during the break and came up. He was getting ready to graduate, and work downtown. I know his father, and he's going to go in with his father, it looks like. He's doing his final paper in a seminar, and he's doing it based on what we did in a course. And he was talking about, it was a law and religion course, and he was talking about how important that had been to him and so forth. And goodness, that's rewarding. I mean, that's wonderful. And I do feel good about that. And all of the nice things that have come my way. But I guess it's just overwhelmed by this sense of luck. And I don't, that's a little awkward. I made sense out of the practice of law by talking about flourishing eudaimonia. And, but I'd have to say it would be, what's the word I'm looking for? It would be wrong to say that in looking back, I have no sense of having accomplished something. I certainly do. I certainly do. But I'm also picky, Pat, and I also live in the moment, in the day-to-day, and I also think about the things I could have done better. Mm-hmm. And I wrote an email last night. Someone asked me something about this gun control law, and I wish I hadn't said it the way that I did. And so now it doesn't seem so, you know. And it's hard to think over the span of one's entire life, and say, yeah, that was a job well done.
Or a life well lived.
Or a life well lived, yeah.
Well,
so it's ongoing.
Yeah.
It's ongoing.
Much more to come.
I hope.
Yeah, me too.
Thank you, Pat.
Thank you, Jack.